back. We're going to be putting magnets in the head today. We have to have those to hold the head together so that we can, keep it in an open position so that we can open it up to mess with the strings and the eyes. So we're going to use these little tiny magnets, and these are some powerful magnets, I just want to say. I have another size that's a little bit smaller, but for the top part here where I have a little bit of room, I think I want to use the bigger ones to make sure that the head stays on tightly when we get it finished. So I'm doing this now because there are going to be some modifications to the clay on the outside, I think. But you can see these, they're really tiny, but they are so powerful. And I'm telling you, keep them apart if you're trying to put them in, put one in and keep another one out. You got to keep them apart because it will pull it right out from like a foot away. Oh, anyway, so to start out, I'm just going to start by poking the sharp X-Acto and making a starting hole. Really concerned about the clay cracking as I make a hole in here. So the theory is just going to make the hole bigger and bigger with different size drill bits. I'm going to start with this little tiny one with this little handheld drill that I have, and just gradually increase the size, making the hole bigger and bigger until we get it the size that we need. Now I think that this is going to be thick enough that it's not going to go through to the outside of the head, but we'll see. I think first it'll go to the outside of the little lump of clay inside the head. So I'm just changing the bits and continuing a process of drilling. This is the easiest way to do it so that you don't crack the clay. If you try to go from a small hole to too big of a hole, it can just make the clay crack. Even though this clay is pretty tough, I think you have to still be careful. So I had to pull out a different drill bit because that little one I've run out of sizes. So you can kind of look at the magnet width versus the width of your bit, but actually ended up going up all the way to the largest size in this set for this particular magnet. The smaller magnet's a little bit different, but you can just keep seeing how deep you are, how wide you are, and measuring with seeing if the magnet will go in or not until you get it the right size. And I'm just twisting it with my hand. After I got to this point, it's easier just to do that because it has that little nub on the end you can hold on to. So we're getting close to the size that we need. And now the thing is, before you put the magnet in, we need to be careful to mark the opposing side of the head to make sure we get a magnet in the right place. If you don't, when you put the head together, the magnets will go together, and if it's not aligned, the head will not be aligned because the magnets are just too strong. So I'm putting a piece of dowel in here that's going to stick up just a little bit out of the hole, just a wooden dowel, marking it, and then I'm just going to saw it with my coping saw, and we're going to put it back in and then put some really thick ink down on it, press the other head against it, and that will make a mark to show us where the hole on the opposite side should be so that it'll match up completely. And this is why you needed that mark on the bottom of the head. You remember I did that in the last video, so you know how the head is lined up correctly. So we have our opposing sides. We can take that dowel out, but just have some kind of a marker like a Sharpie or something that will leave a coat of ink that won't dry too quickly so you can do this. So now we can take that dowel out, and we have the corresponding hole. Now you can see based on this, I'm sort of measuring from the outside that we don't have a lot of depth here. So I'm pretty sure when we start drilling this, if we look at that depth versus the magnet, that at least a little bit of it is going to show through. And that's okay. That's why I'm doing this now before we add the coating on the clay, because we can add a little bit of clay to the top of the head to cover it up, and then it'll look like just part of the head. All right, so we're going to start out. I'm not going to use the little tiny bits, I'll just start with an X-Acto and the smallest bit of this other set that I have. I think that will be fine. But what you can do is just sort of keep an eye on how far you're going in, because I don't want to crack too much of the clay on the outside. I try to keep it as much with the original shape as possible, just because I think it weakens the whole clay exterior when you have to do that. But now that I've seen that it's poked out, I can kind of keep my finger behind there, and when I feel the drill bit starting to hit my finger on the opposite side, then I know that I've gone as far. So I'm just keeping my finger over that hole where it popped out, and then I know I don't have to go any deeper than that with the drilling. And again, I'm just gradually going up on size of drill bit until I get to the size that I need to put the magnet in, which was the largest one of these drill bits. All right, so at this point, kind of clean it up a little bit. You can stick it in. But we do have a little bit, tiny bit protruding. So you can see the hole there. It's not bad, but we don't want to have a hole in the head, so we'll cover this up with clay in a minute. But first, we're going to just get the hole nice and cleaned out so that we know that the magnet will go in before we put the glue on. So that's how it's going to look, and we'll cover that up. And you want the magnet to be flush with the clay. You don't want it sticking out any, or it will cause the head to have a gap when you put it together. Now we're going to use our trusty E6000, my super duper glue that I always use. E6000, sponsor me, for God's sake. Anyway, put a little bit of that E6000 in there, and then if you can pry those magnets out, you're just going to jam that in there with the glue, and then you can pull that other magnet off. And like I said, keep it away from it because it'll pull it right back out. Make sure it's nice and flat against the clay. Get off any residue, and then we'll have to let that dry. Now we're going to go ahead and put the other side of the head magnet in, and we can let both of those dry for a while, and then we'll come back and be able to add some clay to the top part. We're also going to add another magnet to the bottom of that opening, but we'll do that in just a minute. So just get some extra clay out, make a nice flat piece, put some water down on top of the head, and then cover up that little hole that pooched out. Smooth it out with your tool or your fingers or your paintbrush. You have to be careful because that metal tool will pull the magnet out too if you get it too close to it. Just get it as smooth as you can. We'll come back and sand this down later and get it into the shape so it looks like it's a natural progression of the head. You can use your paintbrush to smooth out those edges and get it as smooth as possible. Put a little water on it, or even use some of your clay sludge that you mixed up, the little clay mixture where you mixed with water and kept moist. I keep that on hand, but you can also just spray water on it and smooth it out with the paintbrush. At some point that works better than the tool or your fingers. Alright, so we let that dry. Now we're ready to add that bottom magnet. Now you can see here we don't have a lot of real estate to put that in, so what we're going to be doing is making more of a U-shape cutout down there, and then we'll add clay on top to support it after we put the magnet in. But I'm still going to start with a basic hole. Now I'm using that mark that I made on the head to line up the head parts. And I know then that the two places where I do this will be one, will meet perfectly. So I'm just going to start there with a hole up near the top of the clay edge. And that's going to just eventually break through. And then we'll just make like a U-shaped indentation in the clay. Something that the little magnet can slip into. And we're going to use the smaller size magnets here because they're not quite as long as that bigger magnet. And with the bigger magnet, we know we have the strength to hold the head together. And so the bottom one, it's not quite as important. Although those little ones are pretty strong too. They're kind of amazing little magnets. So here we're just taking our graduating drill bits and sort of placing it down in that U shape and twisting it back and forth to get it carved out. And you can also use your X-Acto. And then you just take your little magnet and stick it in there and get it to the size that you need it to be so that the magnet head is flush with the edge of the head and that it's far enough back in the head that it doesn't make the magnet stick out. You also want it to be flat. You don't want it to be at an angle. Once you get it to the right shape, just put some glue down into that hollow of the U, and then we'll press the magnet down in there. Be able to hopefully detach the see, you can see the magnets just are crazy. That little one just stuck to the big one up at the top. Yeah, just stick it down in there, make sure that it's flat against the side, let it dry. And we'll do the same thing to the other side of the head. They stick to all of my tools too. Like sometimes I can't find that, like if I lay one down, it'll go like rolling off to meet up with some metal somewhere and I have to hunt it down like an errant child. They're kind of funny. So now we're going to do the same process in the top part of the head that we did in the bottom part of the head, making that U-shaped indentation. And then we'll put the other naughty little magnet in there. So we've got that cut out. This side really didn't have a lot of real estate either, and it did pooch out a little bit, and I didn't realize it till later, but again, you know, just you're able to put a little bit of clay across the back of that. We don't have to worry about that yet until we start putting that final coat on the outside, and then we will need it to be in the best shape, and we won't be able to mess with it anymore. All right, so we've got that one placed. And now we really want to let that glue dry completely because that's going to help hold the magnet in place, even though they're going to want to pull apart, I'm telling you. Even when I'm pulling the head apart now, I do it sort of to the side instead of pulling it directly opposite so that it doesn't put that much strain on the magnet glue, the glue that the magnet's holding in. I mean, the glue that's holding the magnet in. So now we're just going to put some clay pieces on top of the exposed magnet and smooth that down inside the head, and that's going to help support and keep the magnet in place a little bit. Make sure you get this nice and smooth down on the inside too, because this is going to show eventually when you're taking the head part apart. At some point you may have to use a wooden tool, because if you use the metal tool, that magnet just attaches to it and wants to pull free. So I like the metal tool a lot, but at some point you may have to use a wood tool or silicone head tool to do some smoothing work. So we're kind of at the end of this process. I thought this was an interesting part of making the doll, because we do want to have this, and this is actually not in the book. This is just because I want to have a head that opens. In the book, the head does not open. They open it up to clean it out and put the eyes in, but then they close it back up. So there we have it. Our head sticks together. It's nicely shaped. We've sanded it. We're ready to move on to making joints, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.